By estimate, 100 or more Americans died on the job every day in the booming industrial years around 1911. Although many people in America's factories died, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire was the event that crossed the line, making Americans feel it was not all right to let people work in conditions that could cost them their lives and not have government intervene. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire is a turning point because it launched the rise of workers' rights and labor unions in America, but is also an event that the American people could memorialize and continue to look back on. 1911, the period of the Triangle Fire, was a time of horrid working conditions, with little pay and small labor unions. From the very start, industries had taken advantage of the young and the poor. Now, working in the Triangle factory was more desirable compared to the stove-heated, dusty, and hugely crowded rooms of most other factories, because they had a more modern factory with electric-powered sewing machines, cloakrooms and restrooms on each floor, high ceilings, and big windows. However, the workers, many teenage girls, worked 14-hour days, earning $2 per day at most, and that was before the bosses docked their pay for the needles, thread, and electricity they used. A slow worker was paid by the piece, and a fast worker was paid by the hour. Also, the airspace requirements that were met were only so because of the 10-foot ceilings. Workers were still packed elbow to elbow. And the only reason their technological advancements were made was for more efficient production. It was this efficiency that earned the owners of the Triangle factory, Isaac Harris and Max Blank, the nickname Shirtwaist Kings. Still, Blank and Harris didn't show any real respect or interest in their laborers, only certain that their workers arrived and left as required, and that the output of product was more important than the people who made it. Donna Getzinger. Employees would trudge themselves to work each day, even if they were ill, for fear of being fired. Like in other factories, Triangle workers had few breaks in their day for eating or using the facilities. Workers confessed that they were not allowed to talk while working, and they were penalized for any mistakes that caused goods to be damaged. These conditions did not go unchallenged. Unions such as the Ladies' Waist Makers Union, the International Ladies' Garment Workers Union, and the Women's Trade Union League fought for workers' rights in the industry's garment shops. A union is a group of workers that band together for the purpose of negotiating with company owners for better working conditions. Women in unions often had little support from their peers and could be instantly fired from their jobs if word got out that they were involved. There were a handful of small strikes, referred to as wildcat strikes, for their lack of organization and involvement of usually only workers from one business. A strike or walkout occurred when business owners refused to meet any demands from unions. Fed-up employees would show up to work in the morning, then promptly turn around and walk out, leaving the factory inoperable and incapable of earning a profit. Small, wildcat strikes were rarely successful, with workers usually going right back to work without a single demand being met, if the workers were not fired and replaced immediately. It took a large, well-organized strike to make a change. This time is referred to as the Progressive Era, for being a time influential to change in the way industry was run. By the end of the decade, more and more garment workers refused to take the abuses and degeneration of their working environments, and strikes became more frequent. From October 4, 1909 to February 8, 1910, Triangle workers went on strike, joined by over 20,000 other shirtwaist workers, mostly women. They protested against unsafe working conditions and poor pay for long hours. Some workers got a slight increase in wage. However, the Triangle Company owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, did not give in to the strikers, but rather waited for them to run out of money to support their families, so they would be forced to come back to work. A little over a year later, a horrific fire would break out in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory that would force Blank and Harris, along with many other employers, to listen. It was the end of the day on March 25, 1911, at about 4:30 p.m. Some workers were getting up to get their coats and leave. The fire broke out in a corner bucket of scraps on the 8th floor after someone broke the rules and lit a cigarette, and then tossed it into a trash bin. The blaze spread, and several cutters tried to douse the fire with water buckets. However, every pail of water only caused the fire to grow. The material was highly flammable, and the water served just to spread around the oil and grease that was fueling the fire. Some people ran down the Green Street stairwell, but many more headed for the Washington Place stairwell. because it was further away from the blaze. But the Washington Place exit was locked, so that at the end of a regular day, the foreman could stop each and every worker to check them for possible stolen goods. People at this end were smashed into the door and suffocated. Other doors were also impossible to open in the mad rush because they opened inward. Many other workers ran over tables and busted out of the window to get to the fire escape, which later became too crowded and fell apart. The elevators ran as long as possible, and operator Joseph Vito said, "It was horrible. They kept coming down from the burning floors above. Some of their clothing was burning as they fell. I could see the streaks of fire coming down like flaming rockets." Many workers on the 10th floor escaped onto the roof and crossed a ladder to the roof of a neighboring building to escape the flames, including owners Harris and Blank. And most workers on the 8th floor made it down the stairs, but workers on the 9th floor were trapped. Firefighters' ladders could only reach the 6th floor, and the nets they held out broke when multiple girls jumped into them at the same time. In less than 30 minutes, over 100 workers had died, either jumping to their deaths, burning alive, or suffocating. During the trial, the owners of the Triangle factory were accused of being responsible for the fire, but were found not guilty. Blank and Harris had their charges dropped because no one could prove that they had locked the door on the day of the fire, as they usually did. And if it was locked, it was possible that someone had done it without their knowledge or consent. The 23 families of victims that sued the owners with manslaughter charges waited 3 years and only received $75 per family. There was currently no legislation mandating that benefits be provided for fatal accidents in the workplace. Shortly after the fire, on April 2, 1911, reformers staged a mass meeting in the Metropolitan Opera House. Prior to the fire, laws providing safety protections for workers were minimal. Even where there were laws in place, they were rarely enforced. New York had a law prohibiting factory doors from being locked during work hours, but hundreds of factories, including the Triangle factory, violated this law. The people at this meeting hoped to change that. At the Opera House, they produced a petition calling for the creation of an investigation commission. This commission was the New York State Factory Investigating Commission, created on June 30, 1911. The commission was to investigate fire hazards, as well as other factory conditions that could harmfully affect workers' welfare. The Commission's reports led to the passing of many New York state bills regarding fire prevention, child labor, and hour limitations, 36 in total. Other states began passing legislation for workers' rights and compensation as well. The Triangle Factory Fire brought about change in workers' rights more prominently than any other workplace accidents because of the events leading up to the fire, as well as the sheer number of deaths. Although 146 people died because of the fire, thousands of lives have been changed and possibly saved because of it. The changes made affect our lives today, from the sprinkler systems in every building to the 40-hour work week. The Department of Labor continues to fight sweatshops in America and keep an eye out for workers in foreign countries. There are now social and legal consequences for the abuses of workers. Because of the new legislation it spurred, the increase in labor unions' power and progress, and its impact on society, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire is a turning point in American history.